Well, hello, Boundless Gratitudes audience, and thank you for being here. Once more, we have a very special interview with a very special friend. His name is Romayne Wheeler, and I met him about 6 years ago, I think, and he played before a group of us at a Genshai retreat in St. George, Utah, in an amphitheater that overlooks the magnificent red rocks of Utah. And over the years, I have had the privilege to be engaged with some of his concerts, and then my wife and I had the most wondrous journey to the Sierra Madres, where mountains in Mexico, which are about 200 miles away from Chihuahua, Mexico, off the grid. This is where Romayne lives, on the edge of this magnificent Copper Canyon, where we have a view of 150 miles of mountain ranges and 8 to 10 ranges included in that vista. And so Romayne is visiting a friend here in Sacramento, and this is a perfect opportunity for us to have a conversation.
I'm glad to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
You're welcome. And he's a real gem, and when we shall see the uniqueness of perspective he offers as a musician and as a journeyman of life as we move through this interview. So thank you for being here. All right, Romayne, here we go. So my first question for you is, you have a very intimate relationship with the piano. I mean,
it's the first memories that I have. My mother was a piano teacher for children, so I heard it before I was born. I could already hear her teaching. The first thing I remember as a child was a shuffle of cards. Each card had a note on it, and I had to identify it on the piano. My father composed something as a hobby, and so we made our first melodies. So when I was 4 years old, I learned to read the notes, long before I learned to read the letters. So it was an intrinsic part of my life.
At 4 years old?
Yes.
Wow. And then at what point did you take up an instrument that led to you becoming so engaged with the piano?
Yes. Well, my mother being a teacher for children, she was able to guide me through the first years. And when I was 9 years old, I went to Puerto Rico with my father and had the chance to listen to Andres Segovia, the great guitarist. Luckily, he was in love with a Puerto Rican señorita there, otherwise I wouldn't be here today. And he played in a beautiful villa next to the ocean, surrounded by bougainvilleas. And he played this piece called Memories of the Alhambra. I had no idea what the Alhambra was and where Granada was, but I felt like the most beautiful music of a lifetime was in that one melody, and that it'd be worth a whole lifetime just to play that music on the piano. Wow. So I spent 7 years learning it, day by day, just a few, maybe about half hour every day, because if you did it too much, the tendons between the third and the fourth finger would friction so much that you might damage the tendon.
Yes.
And so then when I finally finished it and was 16, 17 years old, I said, I have it. And my dad said, no, now you have to make your own variation of it, using the resources of the piano. And so in my first concert season in 1968 in the Mediterranean countries, I started playing that always at the end of the concerts, asking my public to close their eyes and think of the most beautiful experiences of a lifetime, including this moment, if they liked it, enjoyed it. And I've been doing that ever since, for 52 years now.
Wow. And you've played in how many countries?
The same amount, 52 different countries.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. And well, I've got more questions that will carry it forth in regards to that point. I notice when you share what you're going to play And then when you actually play, you apply such a care and a sensitivity to your music. It's you enter you seem to be in a reverie when you play, and it's mesmerizing for us as an audience. When you do so, when you are playing, what is the overall intention of your playing?
Sometimes people ask me, what do you think of when you're playing? Well, music goes beyond words. And when you're in the music, submerged in the music, you forget who you are. You're simply part of eternity flowing through the universe. And it's hard sometimes to wake up from that. When people clap, all of a sudden it seems like a shock because you're in this trance, almost you might say, trying to convey what is eternal through the music to the listener. I think that music is our passport to eternity. We need to learn what eternity is right in the here and now, what is timeless, in order to be prepared for whatever might come hereafter. So music is when I feel most closest, I feel the closest to my Creator, and to the essence of life.
And to humanity.
Pardon?
And to humanity.
Yes, of course.
Because music is such a commonality it shares such a commonality of appreciation in the world. I mean, every culture has their music. And if we could just remember the music and let go of the aggressiveness and competition and greed and tune back into the music, the world could be a different place.
Yes, music is a cleansing ceremony.
Yes.
Not all music, of course. Music that is elevating, music that is inspired. It sounds like a very big word, inspired, but there is music that is uplifting and soaring and helps you to have the experience of climbing Mount Everest, like you, has the motivation to achieve almost the unthinkable, to gain victory over all impediments. There are certain compositions that will actually help you to really jump over all the impediments in life. As long as you always include the well-being of others in your goals.
Yes. I like that. As long as you always include the well-being of others' souls. That may each of us remember that every day. Who are we? What do we do? How do we make a difference in a way that supports the highest good of all concerned?
My father always gave me the advice to always take that into consideration, whatever I did. And if I did so, I would be assured to have the blessing of my Creator.
And where were you reared in regards to developing your musical capability? Was it at home? Was it at a school? What were the steps?
One step always leads to another, and some steps are vital. If you didn't have that step, you wouldn't progress in the same manner. Some of my mother was a good teacher for the first phase. That was her specialty for children. But then, of course, luckily, although we were for 6 years of my early childhood on the island of Santo Domingo, Dominican Republic, luckily again, a professor from the Madrid Conservatory fell in love with a beautiful señorita of the island of Santo Domingo and retired there. And he was the one who opened my ears to the music of Mozart and Beethoven and Brahms and Chopin, etc.
Yes.
And without his help for those 6 years, I think I wouldn't be here, because he made the difference that life was music. That was the most important thing for me always.
And that was until what age?
From 8 until 14.
Okay. And then at some point, you went to Vienna.
Yes, between that, I studied music with a nun who had studied in the Conservatory of Music in Mexico City for 2 years, and she was an excellent teacher. And my junior year of high school, I was in Scottsdale next to Phoenix. And I had one of my best teachers that I've had on this continent, Dr. Bullock. He was a professor at the University of Arizona, and he's the one who prepared me for my entry examinations for Salzburg and Vienna when I went over, and convinced me that the best thing for me would be to study music in the place where it came to be, where it was born. Not secondhand somewhere else, although I might find good teachers anywhere, but right there where it was born, so I would have all the context, the cultural context in literature, in architecture, and everything, because all arts are like fingers in one hand, and each one inspires and helps us to understand the other. So that is why I decided at that early age that Europe was my place. First I went to Salzburg, because it's surrounded by the Alps and I love the mountains. But Salzburg is a small town, and it has some excellent Academy of Music, Mozarteum, that is now a university. But it's not the same as Vienna, where you have maybe 20 different piano concerts every night, and the opera and the orchestra, everything.
Oh, yes.
It's the only city in Europe, perhaps, that thrives mainly on music. So that place became my home for 11 years in Vienna and 1 year in Salzburg, where I learned German overnight.
Wow.
Otherwise, I wouldn't have gotten
to.
the scholarship. I was the first American to have a scholarship after the World War.
Oh. And so you had to learn German in order to be, before they handed over the dollars.
Yes.
Wow. That's commitment. That is an illustration of how the gift of focus with which you were born, that you could focus on language that's that. As you focus on your piano, you focus on a language that's not easy, and to be able to master it so that you could live your dream. Beautiful.
It has to become like a second skin.
Yeah. You've played in 52 countries, many distinctive concert halls around the world. Any particular venues or concerts that stand out for you that really are just, that they are a story?
There are certain moments that are like summits in a mountain range in your life.
Yes.
And I think one that particularly stands out was about 8 years ago when I played in Granada in the park in front of the Alhambra. And I played the Memories of the Alhambra and Gershwin's Rhapsody in Blue in the original piano version in front of that facade. And that was one of the most inspiring moments in my life. In Mexico City, there is a museum, Poliforum, that has one of the best acoustics I've ever played in. Every sound sounded like a small a drop of water in a cavern falling, crystal clear, and it was very inspiring to play there. In Vienna itself, there's the Brahms Hall, where I had a yearly concert always, and that was also a highlight of my life. But you can go on and on and on, and there are many unusual concerts, like the concert I gave in Kathmandu to open up a new conservatory, where Norway donated a grand piano Steinway.
Yes.
And the Secretary of Culture enjoyed the music so much, although he didn't know who Gershwin was. that he allowed me to circle around Mount Everest in an airplane there of the government for an hour. So that was another great moment through the piano.
Yes, yes.
And many friends have come from my concerts, enduring friendships.
Yes.
We tamed each other, as like the Tarahumara Indians say, when they create a special bond between each other.
Yes. Wow. And you just, your piano has been your guiding light throughout the world, and all these amazing, and it's opened so many doors, so much more expansively than you just going somewhere to play the piano. Opened up friendships, opened up interactions, opened up vistas, views, trips. What an amazing life.
It is like a cloak that you put on the music, the piano, protective cloak when you go out into the world with this often very contaminated noise and all the superfluous things in life that are not really very inspiring. But with that cloak of music on, you are somehow protected. Of course, after a few weeks, that cloak has to be replaced again, and I need to come home and recharge my batteries again and go through purifying ceremony so that I can keep on going ahead and composing and writing.
Beyond the wonders of the world that you've been privileged to see, our experience, my wife and I and a couple of good friends, again, had the privilege to visit you at your home in the Sierra Madres Mountains. And that, to me, is a wonder of the world as noteworthy as so many of the other places you've visited. And whenever I think about it, I just think of that amazing vista, the sunrise coming up one of those mountain ranges in the line of mountain ranges that go to the horizon, and then standing on the edge of that canyon, looking down 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 feet into the ravine, into the various fissures and cracks and crevices. It's just striking to me, and it's so quiet. So quiet. The question I have, as I get all in a reverie about it, is why is this your chosen home? You live on the edge of traditional civilization. You play all over the world in very in places with numerous people and all the accoutrements of extensive culture. And yet you live in a place now that is just, it's really, as far as I see it, as a retreat. Why did you pick it?
Immediately when I first arrived there, I felt like all the landscapes of my life coalesced together here in this landscape. It's all there except for the ocean, which isn't too far away. I went there as a musicologist, thinking that I'd only be going there for a short season to write down the music for the University of Music in Vienna. I wanted a record also of the music of the Tarahumara Indians.
And what moved you to study their music and to visit them?
Well, before that, I had been doing the same thing with the Hopi Indians and the Navajos in the 70s. And then there was so much snow that I couldn't even get there from Albuquerque. And that's when I went down to the Tarahumara and made that great step of faith to discover a whole new world. And when I arrived there, I felt like I was coming home because of the peace and quiet and the kindness of the people, the lack of feeling attached to material things so much. People that shared everything they had, people who loved music. And when I bought a sampled solar piano there in the beginning of the 80s and stayed there every year for 2 months, they flooded to my cave there where I lived with them to listen to the crystal clear sound of the piano. They say, play the pianchi. They put a chi on the end of every word, and so it will rain. And every year I was consumed more and more by nostalgia to return. After living in Austria for 32 years, I felt like I had read the book, and I was starting to repeat myself too much. Always playing the same concert halls, always somehow doing similar things. I needed to refresh my life and not just live in the city all the time, but live in a place where I was totally engulfed in nature, where I could be like a tree planted at the edge of the canyon and not like a potted plant that is taken from place to place. When they first saw me, they were afraid I might be a tourist.
Yes.
Please don't be a tourist. For them, that means a shadow that comes and goes and has no sense of responsibility for friendship and maintenance of friendship. And when I would come back, every time they would care for me more, and there'd be much more kindness and warmth, until I finally, in 1992, made the jump of lunacy, as my friends in Austria said, and came to stay and park my concert grand piano there at the edge of the canyon.
But they wouldn't let him, when you first asked to live with them, they said no. And they gave you, however they gave, and they did so because they're a cautious people in regards to being too open to bringing new people in that then could taint the simplicity, the sweetness of their culture. So they asked you, so you asked how you could be involved with them, and they led you to a cave 200 feet down the side of the canyon. And that's where you shared the story with me, where you would come 2 months a year, lived in the cave, had some rustic furniture, brought in a solar-powered piano, and as you played, they would hear the sweetness of those tunes come up over the canyon walls, and they were mesmerized. They were just completely involved. I think that's just an amazing story, until one day they see this man he's part of our community.
At first they thought maybe I was like an anthropologist, only that I was interested in music instead of in anthropology itself. And they were cautious, but they were very happy that I was trying to learn their language. Because even the ranchers that live close by, although they see the Tarahumaras almost every day, they are too proud to speak the language, thinking that they feel depreciated by being Indian. So when I was making my efforts to speak the language, that's what moved them to invite me to the first festival, New Year's festival, where I really was engulfed with this whole new world. You know? And then that slowly but surely, through music, I was no longer a musical anthropologist, but I was like high priest of nature.
Oh.
They feel like the musician is the next thing to a shaman. They'll treat you like a shaman because music is healing. Music helps the plants to grow. Music prevents you from falling into sickness. There's music, a special music to prevent people from falling sick. Music is their prayer. They don't use words, they use music. And so that was the key, and is still the key always, for my enduring friendship with them.
And now you have a home, and that sits on the edge of the canyon. I'm just, every time I walk in there, I'm just humbled by the beauty and the simplicity, yet the simplicity of it. I remember looking out over a window that's got to be 60 feet long by at least 20 feet high, and it just looks out over that magnificent canyon and those mountain ranges. How did that home come about?
First, I lived in a stone cabin that we ourselves made from a quarry that's in the precipice, stone by stone. But it was somewhat dark and not close to the edge.
Mm-hmm.
And I had found a place there that I dreamed of making another little stone cabin right inside of the precipice itself. And we performed for a concert hall that was being restored in Torreon, is a city parallel sister city to Tucson, because people are very strong, hardworking people, and a very prosperous city. And when I inaugurated the restored theater, they said, "We're not going to pay for this concert. We're going to build your cabin." And
Yes.
we wanted to have 30 meters of glass in front of you so you could enjoy it all. And we'll do it in 10 days. We'll send a construction company, put it up there for 10 days. And they took 12 days. But it was a beautiful job. It was a miracle, and still is a miracle.
Yes.
It's been standing there now for 22 years.
No, hanging there. Off
Hanging
the
there,
edge
yes.
of the canyon.
You could say that, yes.
Oh, Lord. So I've had the privilege of beholding what Romayne does is in doing his music, which so moves, touches, and inspires him, and then he brings that forth to an audience who has the same opportunity. And you earn the money that you do. How do you allocate those funds?
That's when I first went over there and saw that out of 10 children, maybe 5 of them would die of diarrheas in some of the most remote areas there. I decided that I would make a deal with my creator that I would dedicate the funds from my concerts to a benevolent cause that could be of help for the tribe, for the 550 families that surround me, scattered about in the mountains there, and that I would only live from the sale of my books and my recordings. And those years have been the most fruitful and happy years of my life. We've made a clinic. We have a small school for the children. We had a scholarship program. There is one boy there, the son of my neighbor, that I saw him practically being born, and he also started playing the piano. He was 4 years old with me and learned the same way I learned.
Wow.
And he's been giving concerts. He went with me 2 times to Europe. He has a special visa for the U.S. as an ambassador of the Sierra Tarahumara for the next 10 years. And now he's a Secretary of Culture for one of the larger cities of Chihuahua, Parral. So that's another reason perhaps why I went there in the first place, was to find this fellow. He's probably the first pianist and composer of Indian origin on the continent. And he has my name, Romayne.
Yes.
Except that his family name is Gutierrez.
And the Tarahumara Indians, what are they known for?
They are known for many things, especially recently for running. One of the long-distance runners that is most famous in the world only lives a mile away from where I live, Arnulfo Kimuri. He's a star in the book called Born to Run, which is like a Bible for all the runners in the world. It's been translated now to 27 languages. And they are known, of course, for being some of the most peaceful people in the most remote tribe in Mexico that has been able to maintain their culture perhaps best of all. Living in the landscape where there's not just one Grand Canyon, it's 6 Grand Canyons, with 4 of them deeper than the Grand Canyon, in an area that is mainly known just for the train that goes from Chihuahua across up into the mountains and to the Copper Canyon, which is the parallel canyon to where I am, and on down to the coast. But many people think that's it, but that's like touching the tail of an elephant and thinking that it's a serpent. But there are, as I say, another 5 canyons surrounding it. So They say the area is, if you would iron it out, it would be as big as France. It's a very, very large area in the Sierra Madre. The real name is Raramuri, which means the light-footed ones. And the Spaniards, just like the English, changed the names of the Indians. You hear the Spaniards changed Rara, which means foot, Muri, which means light, into Tara, and Muri into Maras. But they feel it's almost like an insult. Nevertheless, in America and USA anyway, they are mainly known for the Spanish name Tarahumara instead of Raramuri.
Yes.
I wrote a book called Life Seen Through the Eyes of a Tarahumara, of a Raramuri. It took me 22 years to write it because I just wanted it to write itself. Allow people to talk as they see life and without me, and giving strong interviews and asking questions like out of a pistol, like an anthropologist would probably do. And that way it was much more original, and just have some of my own ideas, what I'm learning from it at the end.
So what are very special lessons that you have garnered from being with these people? What is it they represent, how they live their lives, their particular values that you honor?
What I enjoy most of all is the peace and calm that I experience every time I visit them. One person might be seated over here, another over here, and they'll say something, but then they might be quiet for 10 minutes or so, and then they'll say something again. But they don't have this urge of always continuously talking like we tend to do in our society. So somehow I feel embedded in this peace and quiet, and that has been a big blessing for me. The idea of sharing everything you have, of not trying to impress others with your belongings. If you have something that others don't have, you will hide it away so it doesn't awaken envy or jealousy, and or simply share it with others. If you went shopping and bring things with you that others don't have, you will probably hang your rucksack on a tree close by to the house that you are visiting and just take a little offering, because you don't never go to a house without offering something. It can be something very, very simple, like a little bag of coffee or so, but you'd never let them see something that would make them jealous or envious. I once had my rucksack full of the groceries I'd purchased at a little shop a couple hours walk away from where I was. And we stopped at a house, and I brought them some coffee and sugar. And afterwards, my friend that I was hiking with said, "I was very ashamed of you, Romayne." Why? Because you put your rucksack right there next to their house, and it was all open, and they could see the groceries that they might need for a whole month, all right there, and you didn't share. Well, I said, "Well, I share the yes, but you should not expose everything." Of course, I can't share everything, give everything away, but I should be more discreet and hide it away and give it in small portions. Otherwise, I don't have anything for tomorrow.
Yes.
So it's a different mentality, totally different.
And I noticed when we were there how some of the community members would come, and they would come into his home, and they would just sit, and they wouldn't say a word, and they might be perusing a National Geographic magazine. They might just be listening to the conversation. They're certainly engaged in the music that one always has a pleasure to hear from Romayne in his home, or they're outside, and it's never congested, we may be having a meal, and mother and her child walk in, sit down, and they're just present. They have such a gift of being present without having to do anything about it. And what I really love is when we say hello to them. Romayne and I will illustrate to you. We caress each other's fingertips, and that is, to me, it just touches my heart. Just illustrates the simple beauty of life and the wondrous connection that we all have as human beings without putting on a big show. They are not about a show. And when we landed in the was it a single prop, dual prop plane?
Single.
Yeah, and we land on that 1,500-foot runway that if you go too far coming or going, you end up at the bottom of the canyon. So you want to know that your pilots know what they're doing and doing it well. And we get off the plane, and there's a few of the community members there to welcome us, and they just stand so stoically with presence and with warmth without a word. And it's just part of the calm, the quietude, the spaciousness that area represents and delivers.
If you should ever visit me sometime, you should always be careful, and only to the tips of your fingers, because if you take more, it means you have to marry the person. So you don't want to marry too many of them all at once.
Right.
Another thing about silence, people never spank their children there. They'll only punish them with silence. Silence is much harder to prolonged silence.
Yes.
You don't even get called to breakfast if you're not silent.
Yeah.
And they'll treat their children like little miniature adults and explain to them why something is not for life. They don't say good or bad. They say it's for life or against life. And usually the child himself will come and ask for forgiveness.
Wow.
So there's much more dignity, and the children are used to going out with the goats and spending whole days alone with their animals. And they're not afraid of silence or of solitude. Mm-hmm. They thrive in that, so that they're not dependent upon always being in company. Yes.
Well, I remember visiting the schoolhouse, and the kids. How old were the kids in that schoolhouse that day?
Well, that's primary school and kindergarten. And
they come outside, and they all sit ever so present and stoic and just quietly. And me, with my gregarious attitude, thought it would be fun to do a song for them and lead them in song. Well, I ended up doing really the song for me and my adult companions, because the kids, some of them looked at me strangely. Some of them looked at me with big eyes. They didn't get involved in the song. They just beheld it. They were very respectful in that way.
For them, you were somebody that landed from the moon.
Yeah. And I also had the pleasure of, it wasn't the pleasure, but I had the gift and the blessing of the medical personnel that come out every 2 weeks, and they come visit the community of 500 families.
550 families around us.
Throughout the
mesas and canyons.
Mesas and canyons and ridges. And this Romayne helps to pay for that to be fruitful for them. And I had an infection in my leg that I poo-pooed before we left for Mexico. I went to the doc. I got a simple antibiotic and thought everything would be fine. Well, what happened is that the leg really, really swelled, and it became pretty serious. And thank goodness for that medical facility at the time and the doctor that was there that came up, that was able to lance it and to clean it out numerous times and give me a slew of antibiotics that helped me get through it. Otherwise, they were going to have to fly me out in an emergency aircraft, which thank goodness that didn't take place. So that was all reflective. That's reflective of the value of the societies and civilizations, inventions that can help us thrive, that you brought to that community without overwhelming them. Actually just loving them and caring for them. It's beautiful.
Yes, we made that little airstrip there just to take out the most serious emergency patients that couldn't be treated locally, to take them to hospitals where they would have specialized help. Mm-hmm. And that has made a difference in many people's lives.
Yes. Can you think of a mentor or mentors who have played a special part in your life?
Yes, I had one teacher in Vienna who was from a direct lineage of pupil to pupil going back to Franz Liszt. That was perhaps the most inspiring teacher for me, that taught me the art of rehearsing too, because many times the teachers will teach you interpretation and help you in your technique, but they will not teach you how to rehearse, which is an art in itself. And Ludwig Tschatschkes was his name, and he goes back to Leczetitsky, who was a pupil of Franz Liszt. And so that was one of my best teachers that I had throughout all those years.
The art of rehearsal, why is that an art?
Most times the teachers will never teach you how to concentrate, how to zero in on one thing at a time. And this one thing I do and not these thousand things I dilly-dally in. And learn how to be like a laser beam and study one thing at a time and not all at once, as we often do. To go down to where the nitty-gritty is that needs to be overcome, and not to always be surrounding everything and making a big lump out of the whole thing, which then consumes much time and effort. Also, some of the secrets that Liszt, also Glenn Gould in Canada also implemented, like rehearsing very low many times on all the difficult passages, so that only your fingers would be working and not everything else. Not for long periods of time, but for short periods of time. Like Franz Liszt used to do when he was traveling with his concerts. He would have a very low stool, and that would, 1/2 hour of working that way is almost like 6-7 hours of rehearsing normally, technically, for the
Wow. It's just a whole nother world, and it just, how has your growth, your discovery, your ever-evolving creativity in music, the experience of what you are able to deliver, how has all of this made a difference in how does it translate to how you look at life? It's been your teacher on so many levels, so deeply. How has that affected you in regards to your view and your attitude and your actions for life?
I think music can teach us what really matters in life, what is timeless and what is superfluous. Because most of things that we surround ourselves with are superfluous, not really things that have lasting value. And music helps us to live on that dimension, and one can expand that so it involves all of your actions in life. gives you a different dimension of how to look at life.
Mm.
Mm.
Thank you. Thank you. Given the life journey that you have been experiencing and continue to experience, can you share with us 3 key life lessons?
Mm.
1 lesson, 2 lessons, 3 lessons, whatever stands out.
One lesson that I learned in Tarahumara was hospitality, the value of hospitality, and I learned it. As a short example, I came back from Europe, and my friends, my neighbors, told me, "Here's a straw mat here in front of the house. You don't need to sleep underneath a pine tree there where you like to. Come over here for the moment and put your banana bag," they call it my sleeping bag. And so then each one came, and she put her head on my shoulder and he put his head on my other shoulder. I was petrified, a little bit afraid of what is this experience, this new experience. And so we were there about 15 minutes looking up at the sky in total silence. And suddenly Juanito says, "Thank you, we just wanted you to know that we care for you and we are glad you are here and want you to feel welcome and always return." And each one went to his place where to sleep. So I felt like this is real hospitality.
Oh, yeah.
It is real. Where can you buy that? In a travel bureau.
Oh, yeah. Gosh. Oh, yes.
Yes. There are many lessons that I learned right there in the Sierra Tarahumara, that where they would tell me that they are very rich in all things they don't need. Pretty much like Mahatma Gandhi also mentioned, that it is more important to cherish the 4 directions of life. Mm-hmm. They have a pre-Hispanic cross. And these 4 directions are love, humility, music, and sharing. Mm. If those 4 directions are in harmony always, you live a fruitful life. You live a life that is for others. So that was another big lesson. And it's incorporated in the pre-Hispanic cross that the shamans have. I usually have it all hidden away because in Mexico they say, "Oh, Padrecito," because it looks like a rosary, but it's not. The bottom is the wide part that makes a tree grow, a tree of life, and that's the sharing. There's no word for love. Mm-hmm. They'll say this living for each other, helping each other. That is love. Mm-hmm. And the hope that life is eternal, the humility and the joy, which is parallel to music.
Show that to the camera.
Those 4 directions for me reduce all of philosophy and religion down to the essence.
Yes, mm-hmm. Yes. Share that with the camera, will you?
Yes. These are Job tears, small beans that grow in the canyon, and they call it a ladder to heaven. But they're only used by the shaman. A normal shaman that only knows the essentials, like me, would have 1. And a shaman that is also a master of dreams will have 2. The master of dreams can go into your body and find out where your energy, life energy, is blocked and where it needs to be freed. And then you also have those who know all the herbs, and they will have another. So a doctor that knows all of these things will have 3. But I'm lucky to just have 1. I hide it away so that people don't say, "Padrecito."
Oh, Lord. Do you have any distinct words of wisdom that have been with you for many years to this day that guide you in your life?
Well, my father, I think, was my first advisor, and all along the way, he would teach me, and repeatedly all the time, make sure that everything you do, into the last detail, includes the well-being of those people around you. It sounds like a simple thing, but if you really implement into all the details in your life, it is quite a challenge.
Yes.
And I think that did change my life very much. My sister and my brother, they also experienced the same father, but it seems like every child experiences a different father, a different mother, because that was a special gift that my father gave me, that idea. And my mother saying that no man's an island and all, she would just take in whole humanity into her home and treat them like family without any distinction of race or religion or wherever we were. And so that I grew up with the idea that we are all one family, far away from all the nationalistic feelings, the frontiers, the borders, things that separate us more than they unite us.
For our world to rise above the fray and disturbances that we have created, do you have any recommendations or a recommendation for the world to that could, and just in fact, just what you said about how your parents guided you to look at life. If we all looked at life like that, wouldn't we get along? and
it would help.
Ease a lot of the problems that we have.
It would help.
Yes. So, anything you want to add to that? In regards to, if you could guide let's say you could be president of the world for a day, and whatever you said would be honored because you are highly respected. What would you say? What would you request and expect?
Well, I'd be disappointed if it were only for a day, because then you can't have any long-range advice. It's only for the moment. And I feel that we often do things only for the moment. We should do things for the long term. I think the comparison that our native brothers and sisters, the Indians, use, that we are all leaves on one tree, and that whatever happens to one influences another also. I think that is a parable for all of the world, that no matter if we are in Ukraine or here, whatever happens somehow influences us all.
Yes.
And so we need to have a sense of responsibility to help heal the wounds or solve the problems, so that things don't get out of hand and go against life more than for life.
Yes. Thank you. Perfect. Any particular qualities of being, qualities of character that you consider integral to living an enriched life, a life of worth? Any particular qualities that you have you beyond what you've just shared, that you incorporate to live your life and touch other people in a positive way?
When I was around 32, I made the decision to marry music, let that be my companion totally, and create a family that is worldwide, without the barriers that I mentioned before, and the quality of longevity and friendship have become for me synonymous of brotherhood and something that I've enjoyed very much in my concerts in Europe. Sometimes after 40 years or more, I was in your concert when you played in 1975 and so on. And so that idea that we don't forget each other, that we have that sense of responsibility and appreciation for each other, I think is a quality that I very much enjoy.
Yes. Thank you, Romayne. I have one more question
I don't
for
know
you.
if that answers your question
Every answer you give is a treasure, and I appreciate it.
Thank you.
And we appreciate it.
Thank you also.
So what is the last question? What is a gratitude you have deeply embedded in your heart for having this privilege of life? What do you give thanks for?
What is the main privilege that I experience in
Yes.
life? The privilege of being free to do what I love most, to develop it, perfect it as best possible, and share it with others. I think that's what I'm here for.
Yes.
As simple as that.
Well, I just want to say, I love you, dear brother. I'm glad we are growing up together as we grow up until we're gone. You know? And what a privilege. Yes. So bless you, dear audience. Thank you.